We have Professor Kinderman. Hello, everyone. We have Professor Kinderman from Switzerland with us today, and he will talk to us about animal health and nutrition. So please,
One, two.
Then we shall be able to help you to answer the questions. After that, we shall have about the thanks, we shall take a photo, take a cup of tea. Asanteni kwa kuja. So thank you for coming. We know it is not an easy time, but your presence is highly appreciated. And as you've assured our lead, we have talked to the union, so tuko sawa. Hatutasikia zile horns and everything. So by way of introduction, we have people from mathematics. Please raise your hands. Okay, so we have people from mathematics. Animal health. Any people from animal health? Okay. Horticulture. I believe there's also food science. Aha. Na wale wengine. Pausti? Ah, Pausti, yes. So anyone from Pausti? Ah, welcome. And I hope you're getting to know Kiswahili. Excellent.
Like online.
Excellent. Kohes? Oh, karibu. I am from research with Professor Sila and Dr. Kahenya here. Yes. So welcome. Are we ready? So with that, I think I'll hand over to Professor Kinderman. No? Oh.
Good morning, everyone. I want to write on the listed protocol and welcome all of us to this workshop. And I'm Waititu, the Dean of the School of Mathematics and Physical Sciences, a Professor of Statistics. The Department of Pure and Applied Mathematics is actually in our school. And therefore, I would also want to take this opportunity to thank the Department of PAM for what they are doing. And as a school, we can only continue supporting you. I also want to take this opportunity to thank our boss, Professor Sina, the DVCRP, for making this possible and supporting the workshop today. I also want to welcome Dr. Mike Kidam. I know you've traveled from far, come and give this speech. You could even have opted to do it online, but you actually decided to come physically. So we feel honored and we are humbled for what you're doing for us. I also want to thank all the other participants for finding time to come. As Dr. Bitt said, we know there is an industrial action going on. So some of us should be on the other side, but they have decided to be here to come and listen to the talk. So I don't want to take a lot of time. This is not my day. I really want to welcome the DVCRP to give his remarks. Let's welcome him with a clap. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Waititu. So good morning, everyone. Good morning once more. Really, it's a big pleasure for me to have you around. This is a special day for us as JQuad, and I want to take this opportunity first to recognize the presence of our chief guest. Dr. Tidaman, we're very happy to have you, and really we express our gratitude to you. I also want to thank the Dean School of Mathematics and for also taking this chance to invite a large delegation from his school to be here today. The Vice Chancellor could have been here with us, but she's talked to me this morning. She said she really supports today's event, and we have the blessing of the entire university. I'm here on behalf of Professor Kwanza, who is unable to come, but I think we'll be able to carry on the day because we consider this day a very important day. Find this too loud. I'm largely very okay. Can you hear me from the back? No? So it means you are hearing me. But thanks again once more. I think the vision of the university is largely to be a center of global excellence in training, research, and innovation for development. And this is what we live for. The division of RP, as you know, tries to bring all what we do within the university together and teeth all this together to ensure that we have a public image, but we are contributing to societal impact. So we have an institutional role as a university to produce graduates. Those graduates must be relevant to the society. But as an institution, we have a very critical role, if you listen to the government, that we must contribute to knowledge creation. And knowledge creation is not a thing of one individual. It's institutionalized. But I say one thing. The RPE division, where we do things that relate to research, is very critical for us. And this is why the university saw it very important to define a number of critical things that are mandated for the RP division. And I want to reiterate the four of them that have been stipulated by our statutes. The first thing is research. I think without research, we are doomed. Knowledge creation is very, very important. And this is why throughout the university, we have different, I'll call them colleges, that actually try to actualize the vision of this government. If you look at our government right now, education plays a very, 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 very important role. And we must inform to the current mandate of the government. And this is why, as an institution, when you look at agriculture, this is pillared among the key critical directions that the government is giving. Look at housing, very critical. Health, very critical. Digitization. All those are 4 out of the 5 basic directions the government has given. And if you look at JQuad, those are mirrored within our university. So we really very, very relevant as a university. And I think I want to thank our university for considering this as part of whatever, because it means we inform what the government is doing, and what we are doing is relevant for the government. The second thing that actually is mandated for RP division is production and innovation. As a university, I think we have a number of IGOs, and innovation is driven by research. So we train research to inform production and to inform innovations. And this is why it's very critical to produce both small scale, but also linking up with industry and society so that we have relevance. And that innovation is what is carried out to bring in development. So as a division, we have a key role here in producing knowledge that can inform what the industry is doing. So tailoring our research to drive innovation, to increase efficiency, to increase what the government is looking for societal impact. If you have no impact at individual level to the society, it means nothing. If you cannot create a product that is appealing to the industry, we are doomed. And this is why I think it's also very critical to think about that second key role of the RP division. Thirdly, RP is charged with the decision to carry out outreach and dissemination. I think a lot of us also really publish a lot, but there are also a number of individuals who want to protect and keep everything. It's very important to have IPs, and IPs drive many, many things. But how many have been able to commercialize an IP here in the university? How many people? I'm just challenging us. By a show of hand, anybody who has been able to get money from an IP? But if you go to the US, if you go to Harvard, whatever, intellectual property plays a role, but the amount of research that have that potential commercialization aspect is very little. But the knowledge that creates informs all the pathways that lead to that. So it is very, 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 very important to say that you carry out what you consider as basic research, but also practical-oriented research that is informing information. So I challenge all of us, really, all the research you do is relevant in one way or the other. You really need to give it out. Somebody will find value, and I was talking to Dr. Kidaman here, saying, largely we sit and keep our innovations, protect everything, but if you are the only person knowing what you are doing, what value does it have? So I encourage you to share. Sharing is everything. When I go to conferences, I get a lot of information that is helpful in redesigning what I think. And there is something called knowledge co-creation right now, which creates impact. And this is why the university has said we need multidisciplinarity. Because if science is doing something that is relevant for agriculture, and they are not talking to agriculture, where are you getting that knowledge? Where are you getting that information that is informing whatever? The cows sit with Osuga, Dr. Osuga, but the people doing modeling are from mathematics, isn't it? So we need real-time data collection from the animal scientists to speak to the statistician and the modelers, so that at least we have models that are reflecting reality. So I also challenge all of us here as a university. RP doesn't have scientists. The scientists are belonging to colleges. Please, let's work together. Find colleagues you can work with, because that is more impactful than when we work alone. The last thing, which is charged with the RP division, is strengthening linkages and partnerships. We are here and we are proud to have a very big company within the area of food and feeds, DSM, courtesy of Dr. Mike here. The university is very, 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 very proud of partnerships. And our sticky stakeholders are very critical. But the industry will only relate with you when they find value in what you are doing. So it's very, very, very important for us to listen to the industry. Today we have a real chance to listen to an industry that has grown very well in Europe, in America, and has a very strong connection in Africa, moving within the food and feed industry. And this is why the topic of today is very, very relevant. That is reducing methane emission. You can see erratic rainfall, too much high temperatures, all these things relating to climate change. Methane plays a role there. It's one of the gases that contribute largely to the rising climate change issues that we see around. So I'm challenging all of us. Relationships begin with individuals. The individuals that have actually found it necessary for us to have this meeting are individuals from the College of Pure and Applied Sciences. So we really thank you for this. But it's very, very important to reach out to our colleagues from agriculture, because they play a role. But there are also the other relevant IT, very critical also when it comes to the issues relating to this. So I'm challenging the university in principle through our scientists to work together, because from an individual we institutionalize. When you go from an individual to get to institutional relationships help us actually to find where we want to be. And this is why I'm saying, again, thank you very much, Dean, for being here. I also recognize the presence of our acting DVC, who is also the substantive principal of the College of Pure and Applied Science. Thank you very much for coming. I think I was just about to wind up. But this is to say every individual sitting here has a role to play. If you want to go far, and I reiterate again, go as a team. If you want to create research that is impactful, look for multidisciplinarity. The university has avenues for helping us to do this through the division of RPE, and I encourage you all to really look at how you can be supported in the university, because we actually help you through RP division and the grants management office. And with that, I come to the topic of the day, reduction of methane emission. I think this topic is very relevant. I encourage all of you to pay attention. Prepare all the questions that are necessary and challenge our colleague here. He has been able to commercialize this. And this is why I ask you, how many people have been able to commercialize anything from their research? There are a few attempts from JQuat. Really, we have 17 patents that have already been whatever. So how can we be able to learn how to make money out of this, and how do we package this to make it commercially acceptable? And this is why I have a big pleasure of now inviting Dr. Kidaman to come and share us the presentation. Please take all the notes, and I think we'll have an interactive session soon after this. A big round of applause as we welcome him. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this very kind introduction. I'm very honored to be here. It's my first visit to Kenya. As Bernard mentioned it this morning, it's my first morning where I woke up in Kenya, because I arrived yesterday. So far, it's an enormous honor for me to be here. Great people, very friendly, and thank you very much. I feel very honored for the invitation to present here. Now, on practical terms, are you presenting the slides that I shared, or shall I use my computer? And where shall I connect the laptop? This we should have. Looks like it works. Good. So I'm starting. I'm presenting today the innovation Bovaer, which is about climate change and global warming and reducing methane emission from the agricultural sector. First thing is, where is the name Bovaer coming from? This is something I need to explain, because once you saw where the name is coming from, you will never forget. Bovaer is a combination of bovine, ruminants, and air, right? So ruminants and air. We could not call it Bovaer, because then we sound like an airline, which is legally not allowed. So we had to make this twist and saying it's Bovaer, right? So bovine and air. It's about emissions. My name is Mike Kinderman, currently the Vice President of Innovation, and I'm also the inventor of Bovaer. Started this project at the end of 2008, so exactly 17 years ago. And there's also my email address down here. So if you have questions today and also later on, you can contact me at any time. For the presentation today, you can also interrupt me at any time if you have a question. So let's make this interactive. And also, we have a Q&A session at the end. Whatever you feel more comfortable, please do so. I also want to highlight that in our DNA, in the tradition of the Bovaer project, we always were running this in partnerships across the world, and you will see this later on. And therefore, I also recognize very much the opening speech of your chairman, of Daniel, saying partnerships, public-private partnerships, also with industry and academia, is really helping in advancing things. As of today, we have published all our steps and results together with our partners, which means that we have 104 scientific peer-reviewed publications out, which means it is very transparent what we do, which also means there is no question that is not allowed. You can ask me anything you want, and I will answer everything, because that's how we drive the whole project, right? One thing about the company DSM, we are since 2 years, we are called DSM Firmenich, because there was a big merger happening with the company DSM, which stands for Dutch State Mines, and Firmenich, which is a Swiss company in the flavor and fragrance. Some people think, and therefore I clarify this today, we are a startup company, but that's not the case. Both companies are over 125 years old, so very old companies. You see the numbers, we have over 30,000 employees, so we are a big company. And the other numbers, so 150 years of scientific discovery. One number might be important, annual revenue, 12 billion euros, right? So it's a big company, and our EBITDA is about $2 billion. We are present in, maybe I move here, in 60 countries worldwide. We have 88 manufacturing sites, all kind of products, and a lot of research going on. This is a bit to clarify who we are as the company DSM, because that's sometimes creating a bit of a misconception. We are a big company. Now let's move into the topic. When we talk about cows, the world needs cows. And there are 3 boxes that we put in here. Cows are converting things that we cannot eat. So, right, they are supporting us in our nutrition. They nourish our world, and dairy products and beef cattle products are in every country, on every table. And last but not least, they support our livelihoods. I don't know what's the actual number. You might know better than I, but we say over 1 billion jobs are related to the livestock sector and to ruminants. So we love cows. One thing is, cows, when they digest their feed, they produce methane gas. So everybody knows about carbon dioxide, but let me spend 1 minute on methane because that's important. Methane is a greenhouse gas. It traps a lot of heat. And depending on how the time scale you choose, it's about 84 times more potent than CO2. We all know about CO2 because it comes out of the cars and so on, but methane is much more potent than as a climate gas than CO2. And therefore, if we want to slow down climate change and global warming, we also need to look at methane. The second important thing about methane is it gets destroyed in the atmosphere much faster than CO2. And now if you combine these 2 topics, a strong greenhouse gas, but gets removed from the atmosphere a bit faster than CO2, if we reduce our methane output, that's currently our fastest possibility to slow down climate change and global warming, right? And therefore, we look at methane. That's very important, and it also gives a lot of opportunities to communicate for you why the agricultural sector has an enormous potential in contributing to slow down climate change and global warming, right? This is a number, what's the carbon footprint of a kilogram of edible product? And when I talked yesterday with Bernard, he said that beef cattle are more in numbers in Kenya than dairy cows, so I choose the beef cattle sector, but for dairy, it looks the same. When you look on this slide, the footprint of a kilogram of beef, the largest contributor here on the right-hand side is the emission of methane that the cow forms. That's a bit over 50%. For dairy, it's the same ballpark, right? A bit more than 50% comes from the methane that the cow burps out. So if you cut this in half, you have the biggest contributor already cut. So the impact on reducing the carbon footprint of a kilogram of edible product is huge. That was the introduction. Now on Bovaer. I was not really sure what you're interested in, and I have, of course, many angles of how to present Bovaer, but this is a university, so I will talk about research and the development, and then you understand what Bovaer is, what it does, how it works, right? But if you have further questions, we can also go into different directions. So we say this is Bovaer, a proven solution, and the picture of a cow. Now, a few technical slides. Strictly speaking, it's not the cow that's producing methane, it's the microorganisms in the cow. And therefore, the entire center of the research is the microbiome of a cow. The microbiome of the rumen helps the cow to digest the feed and so on. It also produces methane. And therefore, I'm saying the microbes that live in the rumen of the cow, they are the responsible for the methane production. That also, and the composition of the microbiome of a cow is largely driven by the feed that the cow eats, right? And therefore, different feeds, different microbiome, different methane output. That's something that sounds very trivial, but I can tell you, we didn't understand this right away at the beginning, but of course you learn along the way, right? different feed, different microbiome, and different methane output. So the feed goes into the cow. It gets digested by a set of microbes. And in there, in this digestion process, you have a few waste products. One is CO2, the other one is hydrogen. And in every complex ecosystem where somebody is producing waste, somebody else can use it, right? And therefore, there is a specific set of microorganisms which are called the archaea. They can take CO2 and hydrogen, transform it into methane in 7 enzymatic steps, and then methane gets burped out. So when we discussed how can we reduce methane output from ruminants, we said who is responsible? These are the archaea shown here in red. And then, by the way, do we have a laser pointer? No, then doesn't matter. And then we said, how is methane really produced in these archaea? And that's not something that DSM invented. This is academic research, and we build on what people have done before us. On the right-hand side, you see a complex picture which is taken from a review article out of New Zealand, and it shows how methane is produced. CO2 is translated into, or is transformed into methane in 7 enzymatic steps. And if you want to slow down a biological process, which is governed by enzymes, you ask yourself, which of these 7 enzymes can I reduce in activity so that as a result, less methane is produced? We looked into this and we choose the last step of this methanogenesis for one reason, or for 2 reasons. One is the crystal structure of this enzyme was already published, so we could load it in the computer and start playing around. And I show you how we did it in the next slide. The second one is this methyl-CoM reductase, the last step of the methane formation. This enzyme only appears in the archaea of the rumen, nowhere else in the cow. So we speculated if we address this enzyme, we also exclude any unwanted side effects in the cow, right? Because we are very specific. So we address the archaea that are responsible for methane production, and only one enzyme in the archaea, which is very specific for these archaea and doesn't appear anywhere else in the cow. The next slide shows a bit of an enlarged picture. So you recognize the biological pathway, how methane is produced. And this is the crystal structure, which was published in 1997 by a German team and was published in Science, a very reputational journal. And then when you have the crystal structure, you can start playing with this crystal structure and see how can we reduce its activity. I have prepared, or we have prepared years ago, a small video, which I want to share now, and I hope it starts as. So this is the crystal structure of the enzyme. And now we are zooming in into the active site of the enzyme, showing where the action is happening. And please remember this nickel enzyme, this nickel atom, which is shown as a green bubble. The computer takes one molecule, this is one of the natural molecules that is responsible for methane production, and puts it into the active site where the action is happening. And you see this cofactor and the nickel atom, which will become important later on. So the computer tries to optimize the fitting of this molecule in the active site and saying this is our reference point. And then we had a database of, at this stage, 5 million compounds. Today, this database has grown over 15 or 20 million compounds. And you ask the computer, please find molecules that can also fit into this active site and show me how it's placed in there, right? So you see the computer does it one molecule after another. And at the end of this little video, you get a hit list of molecules that the computer says these are relevant molecules to reduce methane. And this is a guiding principle that gives you an idea what to do next. So a few more seconds and then you will see an overlay of all the molecules or certain molecules that the computer found. Right, you get a hit list. It's like a Google search, you get a hit list. And then it was our job or my job to say, where do we take it from there further? And to make a decision which molecules should we pursue, there's one principle which is said here, the headline, use structural similarity to a natural ligand. In the upper part of this slide, you see the last step of methane formation, how it's appeared in nature. You see two molecules. You see the methyl-CoM reductase, the enzyme that we want to target. It releases methane and it generates this cofactor. When you think about a plane, which is a technical solution for us to fly, a plane looks very much like a bird because the bird, the natural solution, has already demonstrated that this construction can fly. So the plane looks very much like a bird structurally. So we said, which structure of this natural system can we choose for our inhibitor development? And we choose this methyl-CoM molecule here and saying, how can we mimic this molecule so that we can block the enzyme? And you see a few molecules here that we are calling testing candidates. And also, since the question is, what is Bovaer? This is the molecule 3-NOP, shown down here, which is the active ingredient of Bovaer. This is the molecule that we choose to develop further that's responsible for the methane reduction in ruminants. And the other structures are just shown that we tested a variety of compounds. Now the question is, how do you test these compounds? Because you cannot feed this to a cow directly, right? That's not ethical, responsible. So the first thing is you have an in vitro test. An in vitro test means that you test your methane inhibitor in rumen fluid and you see, is it really capable of reducing methane? We had this test in a partner company in Berlin, in Germany, and they used rumen fluid in the syringe here, and you add your inhibitor. And then you incubate overnight in this revolver type of incubator. And in the next morning, because this is a glass syringe, you can measure how much methane was produced compared to control syringes. And in this way, you can test about 20 of these candidates per week. That's not much, but the test is very reliable. What is reducing methane here has a high likelihood of also reducing methane later on in the cow. So that was our starting point. It took us 2 years to find a molecule like 3-NOP, which I show later on. Now you have candidates that are really reducing methane. We also did early toxicology studies because you don't want to feed anything to a cow that may have toxic effects. So if you sort out all these molecules, then you feed it to the cow. Initially, we were measuring methane in chambers, in metabolic chambers, but that's very expensive and you don't get many animals measured. And therefore, a US company, which is called CLOC, some 10, 15 years ago, they developed a mobile device to measure the breath of the cow and the rumination in this one. And let me quickly show what you see here. You see this mobile device and a feed bin where feed is dropped into the machine. And this is attracting the cow. The cow goes in here, starts eating the goodies. And while doing so, it breathes, the cow breathes, and the air gets sucked up here and measured along the way. And since every cow has an RFID reader, you know which cow is in there, and therefore you can distinguish between control and treatment cows. And in this way, you get the animal measured 2, 3, 4 times a day and in their natural habitat. So you can put it out here, you have solar panels, this is the machine. And the other thing is the cow really like them. So here you see the cows are really lining up to get their feed out of this machine. And this is, of course, also ideal if you want to have a lot of measurement points. This way, we are using now to measure methane reduction. Now, we have hundreds of slides in different feeding systems showing methane reduction. But let me just highlight 3 things. One is, so here you see the lot of measuring points, and then you fit the curve towards the control animals and the treated animals. When we feed Bovaer, or the active molecule 3-NOP, at point 0, methane drops immediately. And the cows that have no Bovaer in, methane goes up because, as I said, methane production is very much related to the feed in the cow. When the cow eats, methane production immediately starts. If you don't do anything else, if the cow only gets 3-NOP or Bovaer once, it lasts about 2-3 hours and then methane goes back to its normal level. So you need to have Bovaer constantly in the feed to have long-lasting effects. That's also what we investigated later. Let's assume you have Bovaer in the feed. With every bite, the cow gets it. One of the questions that we are getting very frequently now that we are also commercializing the whole thing is, what's about adaptation? Do you see long-term effects? So this graph shows 33 weeks of Bovaer application in cows. And you see the control animals, methane output stays constant, and you see the treated cows, it reduces methane by 30%. And then people are saying, how about the full lactation? And I created this slide just yesterday because now we have 52 weeks available, and you see that the methane reduction stays very constant. So as long as there is feed in Bovaer, there's Bovaer in the feed, methane reduction stays very stable. And this is also presented at the GGAA conference, which starts on Sunday here in Nairobi with a poster and a publication. And then there's also a reversible effect of Bovaer. Here you see animals, growing animals, and at a certain stage you feed Bovaer and you keep feeding it for 100 days. The moment you stop feeding Bovaer, within 1 day methane goes back to normal. And this is also very important because it tells us we don't kill any microbes, we just reduce their activity. And once you stop Bovaer feeding, the whole system picks up its normal state within 24 hours. That's also very important for regulators because we have no antibiotics and we don't kill any microorganisms. That's very important, right? Now it's getting very technical, but I'll describe quickly what we found out. In 2014, I presented this video. We had our first animal results and everything was good also with our top management. And at a certain stage, I said to my team, hey, we never have proven that we are really hitting this enzyme metyl-CoA reductase. We should do this. So we teamed up with an international consortium, and Daniel, that goes back again with what you said was a partnership. And we partner with Rolf Tauer, who is the former president of the Max Planck Institute in Marburg in Germany, who is a very well-recognized person in the field of methane reduction. And we identified the mode of action. This is very complicated, and we published this in PNAS in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Science of the United States, very reputational journal. The finding is the following. The good news is, yes, it's very specific, and we are hitting methyl-CoA reductase as advertised or as we thought. So that's the good news. The other good news is, now we understand the mode of action. I showed you this little green bubble, the nickel cofactor that is responsible for methane production. What's really happening is 3-NOP binds to this nickel cofactor, and every metal in enzymes needs to be in a certain electronic state to be catalytically active. Nickel needs to be in the active state +1. What 3-NOP or Bovaer is doing, it steals 1 electron out of this nickel cofactor, and in this way, the enzyme gets inactivated for a certain period of time. I showed you if you stop feeding Bovaer that methane goes back to normal. Yes, because there's a repair mechanism in nature that brings back the electron, but that takes time and energy. At the same time, we identified that by its own mode of action, 3-NOP gets cleaved into 2 natural molecules. They are shown here, propanediol and nitrogen dioxide. They are present in the cow anyway. But this is also a reason why we don't find 3-NOP back in milk and meat. And this was also very convincing for the authorities, because normally you could say, hey, DSM, you didn't look good enough. Search harder. But if they saw that the molecule gets destroyed by its own mode of action, then of course there's a clear rationale why you don't find it back. And propanediol and nitrous oxide is anyway present in the rumen, and therefore no way of distinguish it, right? So it's a bit of a kind of traceless inhibitor. You don't find it back. So that's the key mode of action. You also should keep in mind propanediol, because that's one of the ingredients how we make the molecule. So in principle, we make the molecule and nature just reverses the making. And that's shown here. We sometimes get the question, how do you make this? It's also very easy. I showed you the propanediol. This is an alcohol which is a natural alcohol that we get out of corn fermentation. And we combine it in a reaction with nitrate. Nitrate is a mineral, that's also a natural molecule. We combine it to one molecule, that's the artificial molecule, and then we put it on silica, on powder, and in this way we can feed it to animals easily, right? That's how it's made. One step. And what nature does, it just reverses the whole thing. And by reversing it, it inhibits methane. Pretty easy story. So I will show you later on the industrial process. You may ask, hey, such an easy process should be cheap and simple. In principle it is, but of course we need to fulfill a lot of quality criteria, which makes it not so simple. In summary, and this is the take-home message, in the intermediate take-home message, Bovaer is a small addition to a cow's diet that cuts methane significantly. On average, and there are meta-analysis by an international consortium of people, we can say 30% methane reduction in dairy cows and around 45% methane reduction in beef cattle. So that's justified and validated around the world. How much do we need to feed per cow? We say 1 to 1.5 gram of the active ingredient. If you are not a scientist, you don't know what's 1.5 gram or 1 gram. So we say a quarter of a teaspoon in the feed of a cow does the job. And then everybody says, oh, a quarter of a teaspoon, I recognize this, that's not a lot. I showed you it takes effect immediately. Within 30 minutes, methane is down. So you don't need to feed it for weeks and months before you see an effect. You feed it, 30 minutes later, you can measure the methane reduction. It's scientifically proven. I updated this yesterday, 104 scientific publications. If I come here the next time, it will be probably much higher because the pipeline of publications is really full and we're getting more and more partnerships. More and more people are publishing on 3NOP and Bovaer. So this number is now growing fast. And it's available in 70 countries around the world approved. I'll show this later on. We say here, and this is a result of public perception, we get the question, do you change our milk? Do you change our meat? And probably that's also a question that you may have. And therefore, we say we have the same milk and the same meat, but it's now better for the climate. So on milk and meat, we have a lot of data points. The dairy companies, they investigated in detail. Can you make cheese? Can you make yogurt? How does it taste? That's all validated. And also the beef cattle industry said any change in meat, what's about taste, tenderness, you name it. So official bodies have tested this and published. Same meat and same milk. It's very easy to implement at farms because you don't need to change anything that you do today. You just add this quarter of a teaspoon to the feed, which is not much, right? And no other adjustment required. And then going back to this discussion on partnerships, some people said to us 10 years ago, what about manure? And I was thinking, why the hell are people asking about manure? Now I understand it better because manure is also a very valuable product. People have investigated this and specifically when we have biodigesters where you create methane and biodigesters for energy, or if you have manure as a fertilizer, the manure stays unchanged. You can use it in your biodigester as before, no effect on manure, really no effect. And also if you want to use it as fertilizers on the field, it stays unchanged. That's also the good news and also validated by scientific publications. So we created this little overview because I also got the question yesterday about the timelines and what does it take. So this is 15 years, actually 17 years of Bovaer research, started in 2008. I started at the company DSM Firmenich in 2008. So this timeline is also a bit of my personal history in the company. So we started at 2008. People are asking us, when did you find the molecule 3NOP for the first time? Can answer this. That was in 2010. So the initial finding was not that difficult and not that long, right? The heavy lifting started afterwards. So we started to prove that it works in dairy cows, in beef cattle, and in sheep. And then I thought, like many of people, that's it, we have a new product. But then the work started, right? So we had a lot of regional trials. Everybody saying, and I guess that is also true for Kenya, everybody says, yeah, but will it work in my cows? I want to see it also happening in my environment. So we are having testing the compound or the Bovaer in I think over 25 countries, and we are happy to support whoever wants to test it because we know it will work. In 2019, we filed for market authorization because if you want to bring something to the market, you need to have the approval of the authorities. This is a major task, and I will show this later. We got the first market authorization in 2021. The first one was out of Latin America, not about Europe, but Europe was following quite right after. And we have also a partnership with Elanco. We also have now green light to use it in the US. And here we say in this year, we are commercially available in over 70 countries, or exactly in 70 countries, and we are working to expand our footprint. Now, on the regulatory side, what's the regulatory status? That's pretty quick. The countries in green show where we are approved to sell Bovaer. And as I said, we started more or less in Europe, but we also moved quickly to Latin America. But now you also see some countries here in Africa where it's approved, in Morocco, Algeria, Nigeria, South Africa, Egypt, right? And probably hope that Kenya will follow soon. And Australia, Japan and Korea. We are handing in, or we have handed in our registration dossier in China. We have fulfilled all the criteria, that's under review. And the Chinese government, we know if they decide they want something, they also have means to accelerate certain things. And in this way, it's country by country. Initially, we followed where are the biggest herd, but also at the moment we are saying if a country shows interest and wants to have Bovaer on their ground, we are happy to hand in the dossier. India is also on our, so here it says India, China, New Zealand. Talking about partnerships, I introduced or reintroduced the slides. It doesn't show all the partnerships, but here you have academic institutions that work with us along the way, and the list is pretty long. Our marketing team has chosen these ones. So we have in Wageningen University, Queensland, Denmark, Australia, Europe, South Korea, Ireland. So we have a lot of these international partnerships. So we have finished now 150 trials and pilots around the world. I mentioned the peer-reviewed scientific publications, trials in over 20 countries and 15 years of research. We created years ago this slide to show our journey. And what surprised me over the years, this is the most photographed slide when I give presentations. And the reason is that people don't really know if they have something in the field of methane inhibition, what's ahead of them. And this is for startup companies almost a blueprint that we give them for free. This is what you need to fulfill. It's not enough to have one trial results in sheep and one trial result in dairy and then saying we have a new product, right? So this is our journey. And let me quickly explain what we did. It starts with the idea and proof of concept. So you have this scientific concept, which I showed you at the beginning. And then we did this in vitro screening, right? You remember the glass syringes, early safety assessment. You don't want to feed anything that's toxic to cows. And then you start first animal trials. We started in sheep, but then dairy and beef cattle. And I also showed you that we tested a number of candidates. And then you have to make a choice. Which one is your final candidate that you want to push through all the development? Because this is on the left-hand side, that's the cheap part of the story. And the more you move to the right, the more investment, the more expensive it gets. When it comes to optimization, you need to decide what's the dose range for different ruminant species. You need to run a lot of confirmation trials. You need to decide what's the form that you want to feed. How do you get it into the feed? How you get it in the stable version into the feed? You need to think about process development. How do I make this in tons, not only in a few grams? So the first animal trials, they were supplied by my lab, and we discussed on every single gram, right? Because we didn't have much of the material, and the synthesis needs to be redone. Now we have an industrial process. And then when it comes to registration, that's something that people largely underestimate. So you need to provide 6 efficacy studies under a very high data standard. You need to run tolerance studies. What happens if you overdose? Is it doing any harm to the cow? And then you do the necropsy of the cow. So you investigate every organ of the cow, the eyes, the tissue, the bones, everything is investigated. So a tolerance study in this field is easily over 1.5 million euros. Easily, right? And then you need to do safety studies, animal safety and human safety. Why human safety? Because you have workers in the industry, you have farmers that are dealing with the product, you have people in the production site. Is it doing any harm to humans? That's something you need to show, and also to animals. You have to show environmental studies. What happens if this goes into a waterway, into rivers? Are fishes dying? Are algae dying, right? The plants. This needs to be proven. What about birds that drink water from this? And then you have 40 supportive studies on stability, on analytical methods, and so on. And then I mentioned every local efficacy study. And then you are ready to say, okay, now you get approval and you can sell. The registration dossier for Europe, if you print it, it's over 100,000 pages. Nobody prints these days anymore, so luckily. But it gives you an idea that this is a major effort and a major investment of a company before you can start getting such thing on the markets. And then, of course, on the commercialization, happy to discuss this also later on. What is needed for commercialization? Meta-analysis. What's the effects on your cows without measuring every cow? You cannot afford to measure every farm and every cow. So you need to have an algorithm saying this is the feed, that's the microbiome, that's the dose of Bovaer, and therefore this is the result, and authorities need to recognize this. Scale up production, local application points, and then customer pilots, and we said here, first repeat orders. So of course we want to have people reorder the product because they're happy, but that's happening currently. So that's the commercial pathway, right? I'm happy to share the slides. Oh, you have it already. We get recognized for the innovation, largely by several bodies, and we are pretty proud and didn't put all of them. Last year, we got into the Times Magazine, Best Invention of the Year 2024 edition. Mark van Uveland, our commercial leader, was named in 23, I think, yeah, 23 in this top 100 climate leaders. We're also pretty proud that he made it there. Here we have Dennis Reinders, who is the commercial director for Europe, and he was presenting yesterday in Rome at the FAO and got awards. So we are largely recognized with a lot of bodies. Also, the MIT Technology Review was recognizing the scientific part that I presented earlier. So that's really nice. For those of you that are interested in animal data, I show you quickly the efficacy and performance data that we have in dairy and beef. So we have a lot of trials here, and you see there is a variety of results, and they are a bit stacked from low to high results. And I told you at the beginning, we did not really understand the interplay between feed, the microbiome, and Bovaer. Now we are better, and I show you how we translate this into an algorithm, but this is historically the data that we have. But the line that we can draw here is on the 30% reduction. And we also did a study on grazing. Can we, in Europe, and I think in Belgium and also in the Netherlands, you have this obligation that the cows are 6 hours outside and grazing. So we said, can we feed Bovaer while they are in the barn, and when they are grazing, what's the result? And you see that when you have no grazing and Bovaer in there, you reduce by, I think that's 25%. And even if you have this grazing situation and you have Bovaer versus control, you even reduce it further to 27%. That's published, and that made the farmers also very happy, because they can fulfill the legal obligation and still claim the methane reduction in their environment. And then we said we need to make this official. What's the algorithm between feed, microbiome, and the dosage of Bovaer? And we published this with Emiras Kepriap and Andre Banning, so UC Davis and Wageningen, and again, a partnership with universities. And this is the formula. Methane reduction with Bovaer for dairy cows, and the manuscript for beef cattle is now also published. It depends on the dosage of Bovaer. The more you feed, the more do you reduce. And the NDF content of the feed. NDF, if you have high NDF content, the same dose will give you lower methane reduction, and also the fat content. And with this formula, which is published, the authorities in different countries, they say, okay, we know the NDF content, we know the fat content, we know the dosage of Bovaer, and therefore, if a farmer follows this suggestion, he can claim the 30% or 27% or 35% that the formula gives. And in this way, we avoid that we need to measure every farm, because that's logistically very complicated. And let's also be honest, measuring these things are also disturbing the farmers. They are not really happy that you're running around and measuring everything. So this is for commercialization a prerequisite. You need to do this. For beef, we did the same. And then on beef cattle, also interesting, at the beginning, we did not understand why we have different results in the backgrounding when the beef cattle are more on the grazing system, and in the feedlot where they get a lot of corn, right, or grains. So the effect on finishing is much higher than on backgrounding. And we said, how can this be? The same dose of Bovaer. It's very clear in the finishing diet. The finishing diet is on itself already putting the methanogens, these archaea that are producing methanes, under pressure. And then if you apply Bovaer, you have a much higher effect percentage-wise. And in the backgrounding, that's not the case. Nevertheless, it also works there. But this is where we started to understand it's the feed, the microbiome, and the effect that it has on methane output. And that's published. Sometimes we see these results where people that are using seaweeds are making a lot of noise, around 90% of methane reduction. We wanted to also highlight that depending on the system where you measure and how you feed, we can easily reach 90% methane reduction in a finisher ration for beef cattle. And this is a publication that was done in Australia, where you see here we are almost shutting down methanogenesis totally. This is publicly available. We can clearly explain why we see this effect. And that's also showing a little bit the scope of the methane reduction. We don't, because sometimes I get the question, can you not reach more than 40% methane reduction? Yes, we can. It depends on the system. And here you have a published example. Yeah, this is just a repetition, so maybe I jump over the slide. We show also in Australia that it works in backgrounding diets for beef cattle, but that's something I mentioned earlier. It doesn't need to be highlighted. Bovaer has no impact on the meat taste for beef cattle, and that's officially done by the Meat Standards Australia. They tested the meat of Bovaer-fed cows and found the result has no effect, no negative effect whatsoever on the meat quality and taste. That also got published and is very important for producers. One thing, and that could be relevant also for Kenya, is the application. Because when you talk about beef cattle and the different feeding system, it starts with the breeding herd, and this is a picture that we took in the northern territories of Australia, where you have these breeding herds. They are collected almost with little helicopters, but otherwise they are running around largely unsupervised. How can you reduce methane in this breeding herd? That led us to the application of drinking water. Because they don't get supplements, they have sometimes some mineral blocks, but the only thing that they get on a daily basis is their drinking water. And therefore we were working after this visit. I was there in 22 or 23. We worked on drinking water application. And then you have this backgrounding where the animals are getting supplements, mineral supplements. So we are working, and that's largely finished. Can we put Bovaer into the mineral supplements? And then we showed already a lot of publications. It's very easy to put it in the feedlot system. How is Bovaer used? Tackling the same topic, Bovaer works in every feed. You need to look into the composition. Well, we have data from 100% grass-based to complex TMR systems and to finishing beef diets. And you see the pictures. And this is, by the way, this is Bovaer as it's applied in TMR today. So we took this picture. It's a white powder. It sits on silica so that you can mix it easily into feed. But we also have now oil application where you can spray the oil, and I will also show the water application. We are working on a slow release form so that the cow eats it once per day and then or once per month, and then it gets released over time. We have nice prototypes. Here we are fighting against the production costs because, of course, you cannot add a lot of cost. So we are trying to make this cheaper before we roll this out. Also with partnerships with academics. And on drinking water, that's a pretty new thing. Does it also work in drinking water? The one thing that I want to highlight here, the active ingredient Bovaer 3-NOP, when you look at the structure, is very water soluble, right? Really nicely water soluble. So it's a bit stupid that we started so late in water application, because from a physical chemical properties, it's ideal for mixing into water. But step by step. So you have the GGAA here in Nairobi starting the biggest conference on agricultural greenhouse gas emission reduction on Sunday, so in 3 days. And there are 4 posters, and I'm just showing what they put on the poster here. So I can encourage you to watch and talk to the researchers. Drinking water application, we started again in sheep animals. And you see the red is the control animal, and you have all these different days or the different times of the day. And then when you have different dosages of Bovaer, the yellow and the green curve, we got 40% methane reduction in sheep animals. And then there was an activity, again, with the green feed system grazing beef cattle in Australia. You see this data cloud here. And when you fit treated versus untreated animals, we got 27% methane reduction, so close to 30, what made us very happy. And this is a publication that is also shown at the GGAA. We just got it 3 days ago. This is the chamber study at Wageningen University. Also there, once Bovaer is in water, it works. You need to fine-tune the application, but also there we got 20%. So this is clearly a path forward, but we need to think about a few details and how to apply this. How do you get recognized for the application of Bovaer? This is also something that farmers are asking us. So we are working, or we have finished a very extensive activity. How can you prove as a farmer that you use Bovaer, right? Because it's about money, and we want to exclude any misuse of the system, not we, but the dairy companies and beef companies. So if you get your Bovaer mixed in feed from the feed mill, it's delivered to the farm, it's fed to the animal, and the greenhouse gas reduction can be claimed. And one is, you have the baseline situation, what's the output without Bovaer? Then the feed invoices that shows that you have bought Bovaer, you take a photograph, it's uploaded, so that's your proof that you have really used it. And then you have a methane reduction calculator that says under these conditions, you can claim 30%. So this is also modern and showing us in the digital world. And then you have all these carbon accounting tools that need to recognize your activity and translate this into money. One question we also get very often, if we produce Bovaer, Bovaer has a carbon footprint in itself. If you produce something, you use energy, electricity, raw materials. What's the footprint of a kilogram of Bovaer versus feeding this kilogram of Bovaer to animals? Are you positive or not? And this is also something that authorities want to know. And these are the official numbers. The production of Bovaer generates 4.8 kilogram of CO2 equivalents. But if you feed this same kilogram to dairy cows of Bovaer 10, you reduce 250 kilograms of CO2 equivalents. So we are largely positive in emission reduction. That's for dairy cow. And we have a second slide for beef cattle because the industry wants to know it. And for beef cattle, the same thing. We are reducing much more greenhouse gas emissions than we produce. That's also a critical take-home message. Last slide, and then I'm finished. How do we make it? So we are building, as we speak, a dedicated production site in Dalry in Scotland. Why Scotland? DSM owns the site in Scotland. There was space. We could build the plant, and it's pretty big. And several arguments spoke for let's build it there. And these are two pictures from earlier this year, and it gives you a bit of an impression of the size, right? This is the Bovaer production site in Dalry. You see all these things that are needed in terms of solvents. This is the control room, and this is where the actual production takes place. And this is another aerial view from a drone. You see the tanks and you see the buildings. So it's pretty impressive. And the goal is to have the first kilograms out mid next year. Big investment. I want to conclude here. We have already saved 480,000 tons of CO2 equivalents by our research activity. And we are saying this is just the beginning of an exciting journey as we make a lasting impact for generation and the next. And with this one, that's my last slide. I want to thank you very much for your attention and happy to answer any question. Thank you.
Thank you, Daktari. So thank you, Doc. So do we take questions now or do we listen a little to Mr. Njadi from Imfuyo? Then we combine the questions. Okay? All right. So we shall do a 3-factor JQuat patented clap for then we invite Imfuyo to come to speak to us, and then we shall combine the questions. Okay? So shall we start? Okay. 1, 2, 3. Hmm. You want to present something? Yeah. Let me.
You don't have this one. It's just a by the way. It's okay. All protocols observed and procedures. Good morning, everyone. Is it still morning? Very good. God is good. And all the time. So I'd like to take less than 10 minutes, mainly because I think we are pressed for time and my session is not that long. First, my name is Bernard Njathi. I represent 2 organizations. So basically I wear 2 hats. The first hat is what has brought us here. I'm the founder and CEO of an organization called Imfuyo. Imfuyo is a data and finance company in the livestock value chain. I'll be talking about that in a high level for people to understand. I know I'm timed for less than 10 minutes because of the activities ahead. The second hat I wear is I'm the president of Data Analytics Kenya. So first, I'd like to definitely take this opportunity and thank the JQuat team, the leadership and the management. Asanteni sana. I think they deserve a clap. Thank you for the amazing work. It's an honor to stand here, of course, as an organization, a young growing business. Secondly, I'd like to give a special gratitude and thanks to the PAM department, that is Pure and Applied Mathematics department of JQuat. We have worked with them for about 2 years just to do what we have done here, among many other things that we are doing, and progressively we hope to impact the Kenya livestock value chain through data, innovation, academia, etc., etc. And then, of course, thirdly, I'd like to thank the Imfuyo team. There's representation here too. Others are joining us online and others are outside the country. And we also have partners that have joined online. Thank you. So I will just take very few minutes and lightly present something here that brings us home, because it is not necessarily about Infuyo that I want to talk about, but I want to put it into context what Dr. Mike Kinderman has spoken about. So I'll start by a light joke, very light joke. And for purposes of time, of course, I'll request that you allow me 2 humorous minutes for me to throw in a small joke there. How many of us remember when this year started in 2025 January, the president of Kenya, of course, our beloved president, stood up and said, ng'ombe zote lazima zifanywe nini? Zidungwe sindano. Kweli? Now, of course, for purposes of Mike Kinderman, I'll speak in English because he doesn't understand Swahili. So basically, and this is a conversation we had with him yesterday, when the president of Kenya in January this year said that all the livestock in Kenya should what? Be vaccinated. So the usual conspiracists say that it was going to be about what? About what? Control of methane emissions from livestock. Basically what Dr. Kinderman here, Mike, has presented to us. But the conspiracists were saying that it was going to be harmful to the livestock, correct? And it was also going to be harmful to the meat and the milk. First, there is no vaccination in the whole world to control methane emissions, just for your own information. And we also confirmed this with Kevevapi. Kevevapi is the Kenyan organization that produces livestock vaccinations. We also work with as partners. So I think it's good now for you to understand that there is a revolutionary solution that Dr. Mike Kinderman here has presented, the first of its kind in the whole world, which is called Bovea, which helps reduce methane emission by a huge percentage and has no effects to milk and meat. So again, I think it's good for us to clap for Dr. Mike as I jump onto this. Very good. So I will take only less than 5 minutes. I know I've already consumed about 6 minutes. So I want to bring the point home. First, as a data and finance organization in the livestock value chain, our company Infuyo, what we want to achieve in this country and progressively the whole country is to use data and financial models to drive better livestock ecosystems that touch communities, rural farmers, contribution to the GDP, and of course in partnership with JKUAT. And that's a blessing because JKUAT is actually inclined towards innovation in agriculture. So for your information, for the purposes of being aligned, just in case maybe you didn't get too much of what Dr. Mike said, let me run you through this. I'll be very fast. So what you're seeing on the screen is transforming Kenya's 65 million livestock with data, finance, and climate smart solutions. So in Kenya, for your information, we have 20 million cows. I know some of you know that, but again, this is an old data from FAO, Food Agriculture Organization under the UN, and it's under a report called Africa Sustainable Livestock 2050. It's online, you can check it out. And the same report says we have about 26 million goats. Again, this is data for 2018. And lastly, 19 million sheep. Now, I'll be done in a few. Now, the challenges that we hope to address, not only as Infuyo, but in partnership with JKUAT and by extension DSM Farmanik, in other words, Dr. Mike Kinderman. There's a challenge with data systems as far as livestock value chain is concerned. So we don't have a national livestock database for livestock and even for farmers. So basically that's weak data systems, low livestock insurance and agricultural loans. In short, or in other words, we have less than 3% national credit going to agriculture in this country. And we are leading in Africa, by the way. So think about other countries. It could be less than 0.5%. There's an interesting law that was released in 2017, which is the Movable Property Security Rights Act, that allows the use of livestock as collateral. Why is this important? Why is this information important? It is important basically because of the data ecosystem and infrastructure we shall put in together with JKUAT, and by extension, revolutionary products such as Bovea. So there's low productivity in meat and milk, but you've heard that Bovea doesn't have any side effects or negative effects on meat and milk. So for your information, we've actually done a proof of concept here last year, thanks to the pure and applied mathematics department. We did a biometrics and artificial intelligence pilot with JKUAT and a Belgium company last year called Neotex, where the livestock that are in this specific establishment, JKUAT, we were able to read the faces of those cows through artificial intelligence. So that's a nice thing. Of course, we want to be able to work on the data and finance for the livestock value chain in partnership with JKUAT and also DSM for Manik. Market access and traceability is something that we're also going to indirectly work on. Now, to the point of the day, this is Bovea. Bovea not only reduces methane emissions, but also improves cow well-being, which is definitely a high note when you're talking about advancing climatic agendas. So definitely progressively as we go, so that you're able to understand why Infuyo is here and why DSM is here, represented by Dr. Mike and Infuyo. It's because we hope to be able to have a workable relationship that goes across academia, research, and even commercial related initiatives in the area of climate smart livestock initiatives. And I finish. These are the areas that we think we can definitely progressively work on. Climate smart meat and milk. Bankable farmers with green finance. Basically, that means being able to get the right farmer profiles and the right livestock profiles, healthier herds, better livestock production. Finally, stronger food security and climate resilience. Let me tell you something as I finish. In this country, we have just under 10 million farmers who are mixed farmers, who keep cows, goats, and grow crops. And they're the backbone of this country. As one professor in India said, if agriculture fails, then we all fail. And that's just the truth. But there's very little concentration on matters food security and agriculture. Finally, we hope to impact SDGs under the UN initiatives such as zero hunger, decent work, responsible consumption, climate action, and partnerships. I thank you all for your time. I just needed to bring this point home. This is the ecosystem that we hope to progressively build and work together as far as JKUAT, Infuyo, and the DSM is concerned. Asanteni sana.
Again, three-factor clap for Infuyo. So we shall. Let's warm the hands, please. Then we start. 1, 2, 3. Santeni. I'm told that the energy is getting cold. We need to take it before it becomes very undrinkable. So can we take a 5 or 10 minute break for tea? Then we come back for the Q&A session, please. Okay? Or Prof? Okay? You finish, eh? Okay. We finish. Okay. Right. So in this session, we shall have two areas. There is questions for Bovea, there's questions for Infuyo. And in case you have questions related to animal health, we have experts in the room. I can see Daktari there. Any questions on modeling from the students, please, we have Professor here. Anything about nutrition for animals, we have experts. So let's have questions, please. Okay. So we take a round of 3, then they get answered, we then go another 3. So, okay.
Thank you very much for the presentations. My questions are very simple. To Bovea, one, I think I need to get an indication of the cost. Assume I'm keeping the animals. I need to know how much I need to have so that I can be able to feed the purveyor. Secondly, have you done the 100% free range animals? I'm looking at the Maasai's with a lot of cows in Kenya and also the indigenous cows which are kept 100%, free range animals. Thank you.
And good morning. My question goes to Mike. Thank you very much. That was a very powerful presentation. I'm very informed. Now, I'm a horticulturalist myself. I'm not in animal sciences. My question is, you have, through research, confirmed that Bovaer does not affect meat or milk quality. What about the animal itself? Does it affect the animal in any way? After use, especially after long term, maybe 6 months, 1 year, does the animal remain the same? Thank you.
Yeah, my question also goes to Dr. Mike. I'm a statistician. So in your fifth slide, I saw the scatter plots where you're comparing the control and the treatment, that is Bovaer. Then I saw after 3.5 hours, then the emission for the Bovaer group was going up compared to the control. And I really wanted you to explain because I would have expected them to be almost the same, probably after the effect of the Bovaer. But I saw the Bovaer group going up, and probably you can explain what.
Thank you for the questions. I hope I remember them all, but maybe you need to repeat. The first one I remember was about cost, right? So one thing is, and this is also officially stated by our CEO, it will not be the farmer that will bear the cost. So this is in two ways. The emission reduction is not the farmer's problem, and he should not bearing the cost for something that other people will benefit from. This also has developed over the years. What we see is that the big dairy and beef companies, they have their sustainability goals. They have funds available to support the application of emission reduction technology. That's one thing. The other one that we are seeing that certain governments are already actively supporting the introduction of Bovaer. And one of the famous examples is Denmark, who was putting some subsidies in place. Some other countries are also following. And therefore, again, the cost will not be bared by the individual farmers. It will distribute it, and the business model varies from country to country. And some people, specifically in the US, they are also working on the carbon credit type of thing. How can you monetize the emission reduction? And then you have other players coming in saying, we help you to create the marketplace. They also want to make money on this emission reduction. This is all happening outside of the farmer. So the farmer will not be charged with this one, right? And then how much it costs also depends a bit on the application and the jurisdiction. As a ballpark, right? As a real ballpark, but a lot of variability. We say around 1 cent per liter of milk. But just to give you an idea, right? And then it depends on the individual business model and the players that are involved in. That was one. What was your second one?
100% food rate. Because you show
Yeah.
the,
Yes. Yes.
Call them the domesticated and they have, but you not talk about like the free range animals, 100%.
Yes. So one thing is, Bovaer needs to get to the animal, and if you have animals that they don't get any supplementation, it won't work. Simply speaking, right? And therefore, The one thing that animals are needed every day is water. But of course, if you have, what do you say, Maasai is right, they're walking around, they probably are not putting something in the drinking water. And therefore, this is probably a field which we haven't found a solution yet. I mean, if somebody has a clever idea, right, and a good idea, we are more than happy to work on this topic. And that's what I shared also after the visit in Australia, where we saw that the breeding herd in the Northern Territories need to be addressed because they are the largest contributor on greenhouse gas emissions. But they have water holes, and the farmers are taking care of their water supplementation. And that's a real entry point for us to say, here we can provide Bovaer easily. Yeah. The second one. The long-term effects. Okay. Yeah. So here we are in a lucky situation because we have followed animals for a long time, and also on commercial operations, for example, in Denmark, where they use Bovaer for 18 months. I was in Denmark 6 weeks ago talking to farmers that are using Bovaer for almost 2 years, and they are saying there is no effect observable on their animals. The animals behave the same. There is nothing that they can see. The production in terms of milk and meat is the same. So in this respect, we have no indication that there is something negative. The authorities, they required us 1-year study. That's what we fulfilled. But your questions goes much longer, right? And since we have now 900,000, maybe 1 million cows on Bovaer, if something odd would have happened by now, we would know, because if something odd happens, people make a big story out of it. Has not happened, right? And maybe I can add one thing. We sometimes see, and that goes back on misinformation. Somebody said it right on also the vaccines. Sometimes you hear a cow died on Bovaer, and then normally there's an investigation. And then it turns out the cow was sick before Bovaer was even reaching the farm, had a respiratory illness, and the farm is in a very bad shape, so has nothing to do with Bovaer. So these are things that sometimes happen. And this is also a human factor. If you do something new and then something happens, you attribute it immediately to something new. But people are investigating this in detail, right? And again, as of today, we have no indication from this large application of Bovaer that something is odd. The animals behave very quietly, and the performance is the same. And also, sorry, on reproduction, that was one of the questions. Is there anything on fertility of the cows, right? No, it's not. We are also not making a big story, but sometimes, I mean, fertility is a big problem. We have large studies, but to have real data, you need much larger numbers of animals. We have one study where they showed a numerical, even positive effect on fertility, right? Which is not justified to be published because the number of animals was not large enough, and need to study is longer. But again, here also no indication that something negative was observed. The third one. Over the control. After the short, that's an artifact which is just because of the large number. And let's also be clear, the slide that I showed was only on I think 8 hours, right? So it goes up, and let's say if at hour 12, 13, 14 it goes below the control, then so this is the normal fluctuation of a biological system. If we stop over here, it's the emission never goes above the normal level. That's just an artifact or measuring, but that's how biological systems behave, right? They have this large variation, which is also causing a lot of discussions, but that's biology. It's the same for us. If we take medication, the pharma companies assume it will work the same for everybody, for millions of people. We all know it's not the case, right? You respond different than I, and everybody in here, women are sometimes responding different than men. So we are also biological systems like a cow, and that's very normal.
Hello. Hello.
Yeah, hey, Prof. Then
We online. Hello.
Thank you very much, Mike. I think I really liked your presentation. Here in JQuat, we are grappling with commercialization of research outputs, and I think you had a very long journey. What would you be giving us as advice when it comes to commercialization of research outputs? Because I think this is very, very significant. You have taken a long time, but what would have been your biggest challenge to commercialize? The second question is about ruminants. Do they contribute to the same magnitude of production of methane, considering cows, goats, and sheep? Do they really, is the microbiota the same if you give them the same feed? So would they really per capita produce equivalent? And the small last one, do we have natural sequestering agents that would abstract methane from the environment as things that would help? Assume I have many cows here. Can you be able to place a few things here, then they keep on sequestering? And
maybe that makes it easier. Otherwise, I need to remember a lot of questions. One on commercialization. Yes, that was a long journey for us. One element that surprised me is you need to convince the outside world that you have something valuable. But the funny thing for me was I needed the same amount of convincing power inside the company, inside my own company, to convince our top management that this is something important and valuable. So when it comes to commercialization, one recommendation is partner early with people that know the field and move forward. The second one is thinking about the business model. For example, when we started to work on this topic, it was not my idea. It was the idea of our CEO and chairman at this time, Feike Siebesma, who said in 2007, a company like DSM needs to contribute something to the most urgent questions of our time. And if we don't do this as a private company, he said, we are doing a bad job. And he said, what are the most important topics of our time for him? It was two. One was malnutrition. So he is supporting a lot of food program, working with the World Food Program. He was in Africa many times. And he said the second topic for him is climate change and global warming. And that was in 2007. So we had a large initiative which was saying climate change-induced innovation. He said, what can you bring to the innovation table that addresses climate change? We had 50 projects, solar panels, and one was methane reduction from cows, because that was discussed for many years in the academia and also outside world. And then since I joined DSM in 2008, I was new to the company. My boss said, why don't you take care of this project, methane reduction in ruminants? The funny thing is, at this time, I didn't even know that ruminants are producing methane because I'm a chemist by training, but I'm learning. And my colleagues, they warned me not to accept the project. They said, this will kill your career because nothing will come out of it. And I said, the likelihood that something comes out of it is probably very small, I agree. But I don't think it has an influence on my career, because if you don't take this entrepreneurial risk and saying, I want to contribute something meaningful and work on it against all odds, you don't make progress, right? And this is, of course, nice because this is a successful project and it shows that risk-taking pays off. In 2008, the most frequent question is, why the hell are you doing this? Who is going to pay for it, right? And that's also on the commercialization. What we learned along the way is the world is changing. And now many people are thinking, how can we commercialize emission reduction, right? And how does it work also from the beef and dairy companies? This was not foreseeable in 2008. So sometimes it's worse to take the risk and just follow your dream. And if you are convinced to have something meaningful, I'm very optimistic that the market will develop around your product. The second one was on the animals is so dairy cows, beef cattle, sheep, and goats are different biological systems. So the biggest output in terms of methane per animal is, of course, from dairy cows, because the turnover in terms of feed and digestive power is the highest. And of course, sheep and goats are a bit at the end of the food chain. I showed you Bovaer works for all of them. So it's also then a commercial and also a political question, which one do you want to address? We said we start with dairy, because they get supplemented every day, largely, right? And they are mostly because they get milked inside. And of course, goats and sheep, they're more outside and less attractive. But if somebody, and we see this in Australia and New Zealand happening, people are saying we want to have this product for our sheep, it's their decision. We support them. But we thought we are not pushing because we assumed it's less interesting for them. So it's an interplay of what we can offer and what people want. And the third one? Yeah, exactly. What we are also saying, and this is important to mention here, we are not saying Bovaer is the silver bullet. We are saying Bovaer is one tool in the toolbox of reducing climate change and global warming and emission reduction. It's very important. So we support a lot of other technologies. We are not saying Bovaer is the only thing. No, it's the opposite. It's only one tool that people can use. And therefore, we were also partnering with people that are working on carbon sequestration in the ground, right? Different technology. What's very important for the carbon sequestration people, they also need to have a valid process and need to prove that they really achieve the emission reduction that they claim. Because people are very allergic if you make false claims, right? And therefore, they can benefit from us in how do we monetize emission reduction. And then they are saying we need the same type of scientifically proven methods so that we are on solid ground. But again, we are supporting every other technology that is reducing emissions in the agricultural sector.
So one more, then we go to the online team.
Thank you very much for your presentation. It was very good and encouraging. Maybe I stand to be corrected and also want to make this correction you have said. You have said 20 million cows. Is it cows or cattle? So you are excluding the males. Because when we talk of cow and the cattle, they are two different things. The second thing which I wanted to ask is, I'm still at a loss. What beneficial effect does Baboa has the cow itself, apart from reducing the methane? What benefit can you attribute it? Because when you go to a farm and tell him we are going to give this this particular thing, he says, what benefit will I get as a farmer in terms of production, not as in terms of when you tell him we are trying to change the climate change, we may have a big problem because the farmer wants the tangible benefit that you get from Baboa, well, Baboa for that matter. So I'm trying to see what tangible benefit that when we give to the farmer, it can be able to do, and therefore it's important for us to get to know so that we can be sure, even when you tell the farmer this is it, and to administer, it will be easy to do that. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. And we very much recognize your question because we are getting this very often. There are two principal ways for incentivizing the farmer. One is in terms of money, the big companies, dairy companies and beef companies, and we see this actively happening. They say you get more money for your milk if you apply Bovaer and reduce your carbon footprint. How much money, that's up for discussion, right? But that's an incentive for the farmer. The other one is the history of methane reduction in ruminant is much older even than I am, right? Because people have done this research 50, 60 years ago. And at this time, climate change and global warming was no topic. And the reason why people wanted to reduce methane in the old days is methane is attributed to about 10 to 12, 15% of energy loss for the animal. And the speculation was if we reduce methane, this energy is available for the cow and we see production benefits in terms of milk and meat, right? So now we have a very precise method of reducing methane and we study all these effects on meat and milk. And what we see, well, we are a bit careful because also here we need larger studies. On milk, we see an increase in milk fat and milk protein. So energy corrected milk goes up. sometimes very small. It's meandering around the zero, but we have several also commercial farms, large animals where it's substantial. And this is an immediate benefit for the farmer, right? The other one is discussion, for example, in China. China says, or let's put it the other way, the usual saying is from many of these feed additive companies, not on methane, but on, I don't know, probiotics, you get 1 or 2 kilograms more milk. The Chinese group said, we don't want to have more milk, we have too much. What we want is reduce one of the major cost contributor to our operation, that's the feed cost. So if you increase feed efficiency, eating a bit less, having the same output, they said that's much more valuable for us than more milk. And this is something we see very often with Bovaer. You reduce a bit the feed intake, performance stays the same. And that's now also something we investigate on large numbers. And we are pretty confident that we're getting there, that we increase the feed efficiency. So these are the two things. On the animal, more output in terms of milk quality, and for the beef cattle and also the dairy industry, increase in feed efficiency. And here we have a valid set of numbers, and people are starting to get happy on how do we commercialize this one. We stayed very not quiet, but we didn't want to talk too much on performance increase for one reason. If you talk too much on performance increase, the big dairy and beef companies, they say, oh, but then it's the farmer's problem. He gets his benefit. We don't support and care, right? And if you talk too much about performance increase, not anymore, but let's say 10 years ago, the risk was very big that you get into this corner of performance promoter drugs, right? Like antibiotics and so on. And we deliberately wanted to stay out of this corner. We don't want to be with Bovaer in this negative corner of animal drugs. And therefore, we have the data. Now the situation has changed and farmers are happy to see the data, but that's historically why we didn't publish. We published it, but we didn't make a big story out of it yet. We wanted to focus on climate change and emission reduction. But the benefit from the dairy and beef companies for direct monetary incentivization and productivity increase is clearly there. We are taking care of this.
So let me also comment a bit on that. So you're correct. It's 20 million cattle. That is the data as of FAO. ASL, that is Africa Sustainable Livestock Project of 2050. FAO under the UN. So 20 million cattle, 26 million goats, and about 19 million sheep. But let me just also add one more point that cuts across a couple of questions that have been asked here. I think the model for commercialization, which is very important, needs to be flipped in and out and all around. As Dr. Mike mentioned, that the model works differently per country. So possibly we might also need to come up with our own way of how it would work. And when I say we, I mean with the leadership, of course, of Jake Ward's innovations, academia, research, and of course the hard data that Bovaer has. Then possibly we can be able to come up with a different, unique model that works not only for the farmers, but also for the whole livestock value chain. So it's an open brain corner, so to say, to open up the right model that would work in this case. Thank you.
Let's go online, please, so that our other participants don't feel left out. So what are the questions?
Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead.
Hello. 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 Hello.
Yes, we can hear you. We can hear you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mike, for this presentation. I'm just wondering, for us, the academicians, we have listened and seen the data. And there has been this talk about methane and environmentalists. And at one point, we felt like the livestock industry will come to a stop because we were saying, oh, methane is messing up with the environment. And therefore, those environmentalists have been very, very vocal about methane from animals. Now, this is a breakthrough, and it is very, very important. We academicians, we can understand it. Talk to the environmentalists, to understand that there is a way of reducing methane discharge into the environment. And finally, yes, there was this issue of benefit farmers. I would want to listen to you talk about the carbon credit, because that is probably where farmers can see or feel that there is compensation on reduction of methane, and then of course compensation in carbon credit. Thank you very much. Yes, Francis Jonge.
Oh.
Did we ask more?
No, just a second. Now it works. Thanks a lot for your question. And you're addressing very important topics. What I mentioned at the beginning is, if you understand the contribution of methane and the metrics, what I would like to give you is a communication tool, because it's undoubtful that methane is produced by ruminants. That's proven, and everybody accepts this. But if you say, as a livestock sector, we have now a tool in hand that is reducing methane, and therefore your contribution in slowing down climate change and global warming is enormous in applying these tools, gives you a strong argument against these environmentalists saying we need to kill all cows or something, right? And that's anyway something we would never support, because the world needs cows. Accepting this and saying we can now reduce methane emission and have a very strong tool as a livestock sector, a stronger tool than, for example, reducing cars, because cars are producing CO2. That's very powerful, and I wish that people in the livestock sector are using this argument more to get out of this corner in being blamed, right?
Sure. Yeah.
The carbon credits thing is something we are also working actively, and as we said, this has a very strong regional character, and there is also a huge set of rules under which you can apply for carbon credits. And there are specialized small companies that are saying they are taking care of the carbon credit generation, and then also of the question, how do you trade carbon credits? If you as a farmer reduce methane, per definition, the carbon credit first stays with you, right? And what we need is a better understanding how to transfer this carbon credit, maybe along with your milk, to the big companies. And then you deliver more than only a liter of milk. You also deliver emission reduction. If that's established, would be a really good news for the farmers, right? But there are also political dimensions. Some people don't want to get this public because people want to, what's a good word? Try to get the carbon credit from the farmer for free and monetize it themselves, right? And therefore, you also need to navigate through a complex political ecosystem. But this carbon credit and monetizing carbon emissions is growing. And my recommendation is make sure that you understand the rule, partner with the right company, and then make sure that you're not getting fooled for your emission reduction that somebody else is monetizing instead of the farmer. That's my strong advice. We had last night a call with my colleagues, with some people from Canada. And at the end of the call, we internally concluded, man, they are still struggling in how to monetize this. And we need to educate them. So very often when we talk about carbon credits as a company, DSM, although we are not in this business, people are taking a lot of notes because they need to make up their mind and understand the rules in order not to be fooled by others, right? That's my strong recommendation. Make sure that you understand the rule of the game for the carbon credits, and then it's a powerful source of income also for the farmers reducing emissions.
Thank you.
Dr. Murungi, you can go ahead.
Thank you very much for the presentations. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Thank you. My question is to Mike. Based on your presentation, I just got to understand that cows also produce methane, not only when they are eating, but also when they are resting or when they are chewing cud. How does Bovere work during those times when the animals are not actively feeding? The next question would be, does this also vary per breed? Thank you.
Thanks for the question. Bovere always works, also in this ruminating and resting phase. from our perspective and also from a farmer's perspective, you want to maximize the effect of Bovaer. And therefore, the synchronization between feed intake and the maximum of methane production and then having Bovaer there is much more powerful in terms of methane reduction than if you feed it, let's say, at night, where, yes, there is a bit of methane produced and it's getting reduced, no doubt. But the peak is always the feed intake. When you look at the diurnal pattern of methane reduction, the cow largely eats kind of as we breakfast and then sometimes in the afternoon, the large portion of the feed. And methane goes up immediately after feed intake. Really, that's fast, right? And then it peaks, and then a couple of hours later, it goes down and it goes into this kind of steady state. If you want to maximize the effect of your intervention, it should be present when the maximum methane production takes place, right? But to answer your question from a scientific perspective, it always works also in this resting phase. What was the second one? Second question was on breeds. So far, we didn't see a breed effect, but there are people now looking more into it and claiming there's a breed effect. We don't know yet. Currently, we say there is no breed effect. And let's see, because having now 1 million animals on Bovaer, this will appear if there is one. From a strictly scientific perspective, and you look into the microbiome, it's very uniform across the world in ruminants. And therefore, we're speculating, and also our own data don't show a breed effect, and therefore, we don't make a big story out of it because maybe you see a small difference, but the leading researchers in this world, they are saying from a microbiome perspective, there is no breed effect to be expected.
Another question, then we come to the floor.
Yes, so we have a question from Faith Nishiro Kiset. She's asking if Bovaer has any effects on the farmer's health, and should they use protective clothing when handling the animals?
So currently, it has no effect. Currently, it has no effect on farmers' health, but we advise for people in the feed mill to wear protective measures because, and that's very normal. You deal with dust and all kind of things. When you get the feed from the feed mill, there is no protective gear required, and we have finished all the safety studies also for human health, and there is no concern. But for workers in the feed mill, that's very normal. And it also says in the recommendation where.
Okay, so we also have a question from Dr. Kagira. By inhibiting methanogenesis, there is a decrease in hydrogen in rumen. There are some hydrogen-consuming bacteria in the rumen. How are their populations affected, and what are the general effects of these changes in animal health?
Yeah, thanks a lot for this question. And of course, we are addressing this. And there's a publication coming out maybe even this week, also again in PNAS in a high-ranked scientific journal. We observe that when we inhibit methane, hydrogen piles up. When you do a mass balance, we see that what is burped out in terms of hydrogen is only accounting for 20% in terms of what you would expect. And this is also very normal if you put pressure on a biological system. The biological system, in this case, the microbiome, reacts. We were talking, and I got the question, how about performance increase? We think that the performance increase that we see in terms of volatile fatty acids and other ingredients in the rumen, it's because the hydrogen is rechanneled by microorganisms that can use this hydrogen. And what we did is, with a large team of international researchers, we wanted to understand this hydrogen production and consumption pathways in order to rechannel the hydrogen very specifically and to increase animal performance. And we are working actively on this. And here I'm also asking the research community here in Kenya, if you have a good idea what we could do to rechannel all the hydrogen and keep this energy in the cow, that would be fantastic and a great research project. So we are working on this because our expectation is if we fully achieve this, the performance increase while inhibiting methane will be maximized. And that's, of course, the best case outcome. We see already in a performance increase, but we feel in rechanneling the hydrogen is the key question that we need to solve. When we think about methane and methane production and we think it's complicated, I can tell you the system of hydrogen production and consumption pathways is 10 times more complex. So no wonder that this takes a bit more time. But we have now also all these technologies like metagenomics and data analysis and AI systems. So we have a justified hope that we will crack this code soon. But again, to all of you, if you have a very good idea or hypothesis how to solve this, I encourage you to contact us and we work together on this project.
Thank you. So 2 questions from the floor so that you got 1 more question online, okay?
Okay, so Dr. Kagira again, what are the incentives that will be used for farmers to buy and use these products, especially since their concern is income and productivity of the animals?
As I said before, the incentives can be different, and we are working on this. One incentive is direct monetization. The big companies have sustainability goals, and they can monetize the achievement of their sustainability goals. So therefore, they encourage their farmer in using the product, claiming the reduction, and pay them extra money. That's a direct incentive. And the other incentive is, of course, if we think about farmers are also incentivized by their milk quality. So energy corrected milk, the higher, the more money they get. And if Bovaer is not only reducing emissions, but also changing the energy corrected milk in a positive way, that's a direct monetization for the farmer. The third one is feed efficiency. If feed efficiency goes up, you reduce one of the cost factors of raising your animals, the feed, and that's a direct compensation for using the product. So there are a multitude of things that we can use to incentivize the farmer. We say as a company, the farmer will not bear the cost. The cost will be distributed in other ways in the value chain.
Amos? Okay.
Okay, I wanted to ask something, although it is related to what Dr. Kagira has asked. Okay, you didn't show any data on the pH, rumen pH, when the product is used, because that would show then what is happening when the hydrogen accumulate in the rumen. Because the product is working by hindering the formation of methane and not necessarily, modifying the production of methane and carbon dioxide. And when then hydrogen would accumulate, that would affect the pH and therefore would have an effect on the fermentation patterns. And then related to that, what is your take on the quality of the fodder that the animals are taking? Because this has an effect on the availability of the various products, particularly carbon dioxide. What could be the effect on the fermentation patterns? Because that would have an effect on the availability of the carbon dioxide and the hydrogen. So how would that then come in? And especially also on the recommendations for use, the dosage. Because if you have a farmer that is having high quality forage with more soluble sugars, and I heard you mentioning about NDF and fats, then they would actually, I would expect that they would use less of the product, because there is less carbon dioxide being produced at the end and hydrogen. So what would be your comment on that?
So on hydrogen and pH, the hydrogen gas, or the pH value of the rumen is determined by the so-called volatile fatty acids, so lactic acid and then formic acid and so on. Hydrogen as a gas will not influence the pH. But we are getting the question quite often. People are concerned that the pH is going into a more acidic direction and therefore causing problems with the cow. To the big of our surprise, but also nice, and we are not complaining. We have now so many data. If you feed Bovaer, it's not getting more acidic, it's getting more back to neutral. And this is specifically relevant for the beef cattle industry because they are fighting a lot against acidosis. So if you include Bovaer, yes, hydrogen piles up, but it has no influence on the pH because hydrogen gas in itself does not influence the pH. pH is determined by hydrogen ions, H+, and hydrogen gas, H2, is just burped out or rechanneled. On the fermentation pattern, this is the best investigated field in this entire research because people were always looking into the volatile fatty acid production during fermentation and how does it change under the influence of Bovaer and reducing methane. And the good news is that the acetate to propionate ratio, which is always an indicator of animal performance, it always produces more of the longer chain volatile fatty acids like the propionate, butyrate, valorate, which is good for the animal to the expense on acetates. And this is one way how the biological system reacts on this increase on methane reduction, because different fermentation patterns are producing different amounts of hydrogen equivalents, right? And if you put pressure on the system that they cannot get rid of the hydrogen that easy anymore because hydrogen is transformed into methane, the system thinks, that's a picture, where do I shift my fermentation patterns to produce less hydrogen? And as a result, we are producing longer volatile fatty acids, and that's where the hydrogen is kept in the rumen, and that's leading to an increased performance. And therefore, we are killing two birds with one stone. One is we are not even getting more acidic, we are getting less acidic. And on the other hand, we are producing more of the valuable volatile fatty acids for the energy situation of the cow. But the fermentation pattern and the change is, of course, the holy grail of the whole research, and many people are looking into it. But so far, it's always going in the right direction. And we have, as I said, over 100 publications demonstrating this, and no exception. Okay? That was the third question for you, or did I answer your questions? No.
Generally answered, but I about the dosage now. There is a farmer, for example, died politically.
Yeah.
So would you recommend use?
So we always recommend that you adapt your dosage to the current feeding situation. Yes. And the answer to your question is yes. Depends what you want to achieve, right? And there are many recommendations, and they have a very regional aspect because the feed is very different in different regions. And therefore, and this is also the in the decision of the farmer how much he wants to use it. Because you order your feed from the feed mill, and then you can adjust the dosage of Bovaer. And that's done across the world. We get enough data from across the world, from tropical countries, I'm not sure, but we are taking any data that people are willing to share with us to optimize the system and the usage of Bovaer, right? Yes.
Dr. Mike, professors, doctors, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I am Granton Munene Gitonga, BSc Agriculture. I have three questions. Do Bovaer strategies address the root cause of greenhouse gases, or do they just treat the symptoms? Which the symptoms is the methane production, and the root cause being the rising global demand for cattle products such as lamb, meat, and milk. Second question, what role does genetics and feed play in the methane production? Let's say, are there animals produced that produce less methane and still on Bovaer? The third one is, and the last one, interaction between Bovaer and drugs. Let's say not the ingestibles, the oral drugs. When the animal ingests it, what's the interaction between the Bovaer and the drug? Does it have any side effect? Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, thanks for your question. I need to ask back when you said the root cause of greenhouse gas emissions, and the root cause might be more animals means per definition more. So we are in this respect, not addressing the root cause, because that would mean we would advocate for less animals, right? But that's not our job. That's probably NGOs and I heard the word environmentalists, and that's also the decision of individual cultures and countries. That's not up to us. We say in this setting, we can help you in reducing greenhouse gas emissions and methane emissions. Is it up to us to decide how the world or how the country is feeding its population? That's really not up to us. So yes, we are working on the symptoms. The second question was on genetics, right? So, and can you repeat genetics and?
Genetics versus play over.
So the major driver for this emission is the feed. It's not the genetics. Of course, the genetics host microbiome interaction is a strong interaction that we have not fully understood. But currently, our saying is in a given genetic situation, the main driver is the feed. But people are breeding for less methane emission animals, right? So there's a breeding program. The breeding program is also much older than we are, right? That's also running for over 50 years. The improvement is very small. It's in the 1 or 2% range for a long period of time, but they are improving constantly. So this is also something that they do. One criticism on the genetics is sometimes you have breed animals for reduced methane emission, and then if you investigate the real root cause for this reduced emission is they have a smaller rumen. Smaller rumen means smaller feed intake, means smaller methane emission. But that also comes with a productivity loss, and then people are not happy anymore, right? So this is something that you need to balance. And the breeding program, yes, but we have not many contacts. It's ongoing, and people are supporting it, and for the right reason. Is it the magic bullet for methane reduction on short term to reach the climate change targets for 2030 and 2040? Probably not, right? And the third one? Yeah, that's also very well established. So I showed you the mode of action of Bovaer that interacts only with this methylcoam reductase. No other drug that's animal drug that's on the market is doing this. And therefore, we have seen zero interaction in what form whatsoever with animal drugs. You know that we have a partnership with the company Elanco, which is selling monensin, right? This ionophore. And one of our first trials was, do we have any negative effects in the interaction with monensin? No, there's even a small additive effect when it comes to emission reduction. On the other hand, they are both operating in so different mode of actions that there is no interactions. And many people are now investigating since 5 years potential interactions with other things, and we haven't found any. So that's good. I get a lot of questions, can we combine Bovaer and nitrate, for example, and saying because nitrate is also out there for decades in reducing methane. So many people want to test the combination effect of Bovaer and nitrate, hoping that methane reduction gets enhanced. And this is also published. It gets enhanced a bit, not so much, but there's also no negative effect. So it's additive, which is nice, right? But what we are looking for is if somebody has something that increases the efficacy of Bovaer by a factor of 10, right? Real synergy instead of small additive interactions. But that's a large program that we are running in our company, the interaction with other things in terms of improved animal performance, more milk, more meat, or more energy-corrected milk. And we are also closely observing if we see any negative effects. It's a very valid question with animal drugs that are used, vaccines for animals and so on. So far, no negative interaction. And we think it's easily explained by this very specific mode of action of Bovaer that's so different that it doesn't interact with anything else that animal drugs are doing.
Okay, thanks for that presentation. Now, all along, you have talked about positive artifacts, but you have not talked about negative. I think it would be a good idea to encourage those who are carrying out empirical research on this product to report what they find out. Because I don't believe you can only have positive artifacts and no single negative one. Thanks.
Yeah, and I agree with you. The good thing is, over the last 17 years, everything that was done with Bovaer has been published, right? And therefore, if you had negative artifacts, that would also have been published. So let's see, now it's in the commercial phase, and the number of animals and people using it is growing exponentially. And therefore, we also expect that people report what they find. I mentioned we had some negative effects reported, and then if people are going there, independent people, and investigating it, they find out that it has nothing to do with Bovaer, and then it's not a negative artifact, right? But let's see. So far, we are in the lucky situation that we don't have any negative. I mentioned something, reduced feed intake. Yes, but that's also published. It comes with the benefit of an increased feed efficiency. Some people are even positive on this one. The good thing is it's all public and it's discussed, because that's the only way of generating the trust that's needed for the application of such a technology. If people don't trust it, they don't use it, right? And this is our only way forward. Make it publicly available to everybody so that we have a discussion.
Last question.
Okay. Thank you. I'm from a different background. I mean, from build industry or build environment. My question is, so we are more of we would like to apply some of the things that we learn here. I would want to ask a question to someone who is an expert in renewable energy, whether that person is concerned that the raw material is being taken away because the methane is being less. Now, if I come back to doctor, is the methane, what is the percentage of methane? What percentage of methane is reduced? By how much? Is it 20%, 30%? And secondly, the methane, I didn't know that methane is also produced during breathing when the animals are resting. I thought methane is only produced from the waste, the dung. But today, now I know. So assuming I still go with my thought that it's produced from the dung, am I correct to say also dung?
Yes.
Yes. So if it's produced from the dung, so is the methane produced from dung now using the BOVA product? So people who are doing renewable energy through biomass, will they be affected? Will their raw material go down? And then, when you compare methane from the free range and the methane, the cattle that have grazed from natural greens and what have you, no feeds, no additives, and the ones that are from feedlots, are the methane produced the same without necessarily adding your product? And lastly, the methane that is produced while the animals are resting, what amount is it? And as compared to the methane from the dung, or what amount of methane is highest compared to the resting or the dung? Does the dung produce the biggest amount of methane or not? And then when we are reducing, maybe this is the same question I'd asked, what amount of methane is reduced by your product? Thank you.
Thanks for your question. So the largest part of the methane production of a dairy cow is the fermentation in the rumen, and it's burped out. So that's the dung. Once it's out, it's also producing methane. Not so much if it's left in the open air, and that declines. So the one study that we have published, a number of studies, if you feed Bovaer to the cow, you reduce the methane output that's burped out. But it has no influence on the dung. This can be used in biodigesters and for renewable energies as before, has no influence. So that was one concern, and we can take this away. The composition of the dung stays the same, and it can be used in biodigesters or as fertilizers. It's also very important because dung is a very important byproduct of the raising cattle. If you want, but nobody does this, and we don't encourage this, if you apply Bovaer to the dung directly, you reduce methane, but that's not feasible, right? So exactly. What was the second question? The reduction of methane. Yes. So when we take all the data and also a reasonable amount of Bovaer, I mean, I showed you can shut down methanogenesis fully, but that's something that you don't want to do because you need a lot. In a commercially viable operation, we reduce methane for dairy cows by 30%. And in beef cattle, the number is a bit higher. And that's also due to the feeding system. Across all the studies, 45%. But I also showed you 90% methane reduction in certain cases, right? Depends a bit, but it depends on the feeding system. So the ballpark number that you can keep in your mind or note down is 30% in dairy and 45% in beef cattle operations.
Comparison, animals that are feeding greens.
Yeah, that are compared to animals that are in the same feeding situation but control animals, right? And now your question was, what's the methane output of animals out there in the grazing versus the animals that are in the barn, right? There are two ways of looking at it. One is the output of methane per kilogram of edible product, let's say per kilogram of milk, right? And of course, the animals out there that are not taking care of their grazing and so on, the output of methane per kilogram of milk is very high compared to the animals that are in detained operations because they are more productive. Let's say they give 10 more liters of milk, but they only produce, I don't know, 20% more methane. So per kilogram of milk, they are better. So one way of reducing methane globally is if you increase your animal performance, more milk or more meat, you need less animals for the same, feeding the same amount of people, and therefore your greenhouse gas emission will go down. Absolutely. I mean, in absolute values, the animals on pasture are not higher, right? On absolute values. But per kilogram of milk, because they don't produce so much milk, the emission is higher. Right? And therefore you need to address both systems.
So thank you very much for that very interesting session. As Doc sits down, can you please give him a round of applause? And now I would want to invite Dr. Kahenya to give us the vote of thanks, and then he'll tell us how to close the session. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Registrar. Thank you so much for leading us so well. So I want us to very quickly, I'll take us through the vote of thanks. And I want to appreciate us in groups. So the first appreciation, I want you to help me appreciate our chief guest and Infuyo. And we'll do it in a very simple way that have been taught by Professor Sila. Tutawaangushia. I hope you understand. Eh? So we will just one clap. 1, 2, 3. So that is for our chief guests and Infuyo. The second group that I want to appreciate is the university leadership. We've been facilitated by the university. We've seen our DVC come and sit with us from morning up to now. We want to appreciate that. We've seen our dean. We've seen our dean of students. We've seen many directors, many heads of departments. And for that, I want us to appreciate them. 1, 2, 3. The other group I want to appreciate is a committee that was responsible for planning for this event. You will agree with me, it takes a lot of efforts. We want to appreciate all the committee members. We want to appreciate our media team that has been taking care of those of us who are online. And I also want to appreciate our secretariat that has been taking note of what has been happening and even keeping a record of those of us who attended. Let's appreciate them. 1, 2, 3. Finally, I want to appreciate or us to appreciate ourselves for availing ourselves and taking time to understand and to
Yeah, you know, it was some of the terms that Dr. Mike was mentioning and some of the pathways he was describing here were requiring a lot of efforts. At one time, I was almost like, am I going to biochemistry? But then it helped us to understand. So let's appreciate ourselves. Finally, let's appreciate our Lord Almighty for helping us to come to this point. 1, 2, 3. So thank you so much. I want to stop there. So next, after this, there's a cup of tea that's served outside here. Our guest will be with us in Fuyo, Mike, and the rest of us. Let's take time to interact. Let's take time to enjoy the cup of tea. Then we leave at our pleasure. I think I want to end there, and I will request a volunteer, probably our reverend here, to lead us in a closing prayer and pray for the cup of tea. Daktari.
Father, we are thankful. We have been praying for this occasion, for this public election, that it will be success and that we will be able to benefit from it. We thank you for our visitors. We also thank you for the university management and all those who are involved. And now, Lord, you have guided us and we are thankful to you, even as we go to our respective places. We thank you even for the cup of tea as we continue to interact with one another. This we ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
Oh, excuse me. Excuse me, there's a request that we take one group photo very quickly. We go downstairs, we take a group photo, then we come for the cup of tea. Please.